Okay, let's try this again. For some odd reason, my big computer that sits right here, it stopped recording the camera, so I had to put it in the shop. So I'm recording this on the little computer. Hopefully we can get through this together. If not, I don't know what to tell you. Of course, the cats all want to have their input as well. Coffee can keep the boogeyman away. Well, at least in my world he can. Drink more coffee and get more things done. To get the best coffee in the world, swing by 4501 McPherson, the Organic Man Coffee Trike. If it's too far to drive, you can go to organicmancoffeetrike.shop. The Boogeyman has dozens of different ways to spell his name and hundreds of different manifestations. Every country on the planet has some form of boogeyman story to keep kids on the right path. Not all boogeymen can be kept away simply by obeying your folks. Some will swoop in on you despite your best efforts to behave properly. A boogeyman have no specific appearance, and conceptions vary drastically by households, cultures, and location. They are most commonly depicted as masculine or androgynous monsters that punish children for misbehaving. The boogeyman and similar monsters can be found in many cultures around the world. Boogeymen may target a specific act or general misbehavior depending on the purpose of the invoking the figure, often on a basis of a warning from an authoritative figure to a child. Then there are some boogeymen that prey on anyone who is a convenient target. The term is sometimes used as a non-specific punisher of those who don't listen to their elders. On occasion, the boogeyman is the synonym of the devil. Synonym? That thing. The word boogeyman is used to describe a monster in English. It comes from Middle English bugay or bogey, which means frightening specter. The boogeyman itself is known from the 15th century, though boogeyman stories are much older. Middle English bogey means a terror or a scarecrow. It relates to the booga-bear from goblin or scarecrow and bear. A booga-bear is a legendary creature or type of hobgoblin comparable to the boogeyman, also known as a boogaboo or a babau or a kukui. The creature has more names than I can possibly say, all of which were historically used in some cultures to frighten disobedient children. The booga-bear was a demon in the form of a bear that ate small children. The booga-bear was a demon in the form of a bear. The word boogaboo, with a similar pair of meanings, may have arisen as an alteration of booga-bear. In some stories, these creatures are found just about anywhere, depending on who you talk to. I'm having a bit of difficulty reading my notes because they're a little tiny because I've got the camera and the notes open on the same page. The word has equivalent in many European languages: boogle from Scotland, puka from Irish. I thought a puka was a giant invisible rabbit. I'll bet Vic Hermanson gets that one. In the 1950s movie Harvey, Elwood P. Dowd, played by Jimmy Stewart, is an amiable but eccentric man whose best friend is an invisible 6.5-foot tall white rabbit named Harvey. As described by Elwood, Harvey is a puka, a benign but mischievous creature from Celtic mythology. Elwood spends most of his time taking Harvey around town, drinking at various bars, and introducing Harvey to almost every person he meets. much to the puzzlement of strangers, though Elwood's friends have accepted Harvey's existence. His elder sister Vida and niece Myrtle May live with him in a large estate, but have become social outcasts along with Elwood due to his obsession with Harvey. Speaking of Vic, check out Trailer Trash Terrors. Vic, Beelzebubba, and a few more odd characters, along with Annabelle Lee, the creepy little girl, who has a lot to say about both Vic and me. I haven't heard Annabelle Lee say anything about JJ from Southern Demonology yet. Maybe in the past show. I've listened to a few of his shows, and he is quite impressive. JJ knows a lot of things about a lot of things. In Welsh, they call them pauca or bugan. The Cornish have the buka. In Norway, they have what looks to be the boosman. As I said, there are hundreds of names that are all used to describe the boogeyman. Descriptions of the boogeyman vary across cultures, yet there are often commonalities between them. These may include having claws, talons, or sharp teeth. Some are covered in coarse black hair. The nature of the creature varies from culture to culture, although most examples are said to be kind of spirit, demon, witch, or other legendary creatures. Some are described as having certain animal features, such as horns, hooves, and bug-like appearances. People have reported seeing a disembodied hand that scuttles about like a spider. The personality traits of the boogeyman can be divided into three categories. The kind that punish misbehaving children, probably the most common one. The kind that is more prone to violence, attacking just about anyone found outside at night. Followed by the boogeyman that protects the innocent. The largest majority of boogeyman function to frighten children with potential punishments and not actually to inflict a whole lot of damage. The more vicious boogeyman is said to steal the children at night and even eat them, or to commit some other violence. The last category is the boogeyman who protects people and only punishes those guilty, regardless of age. Krampus can be likened to a boogeyman. He visits children who didn't behave during the year leading up to Christmas. On December 5th, Krampus comes around to beat the daylights out of the less nasty kids, or haul them away to some dark cave where he consumes them. It is difficult to find the original source of the legends. The boogeyman was first referenced for the hobgoblin described in the 16th century England. Many believe that they were made to torment humans, and while some only played simple pranks, others were more vengeful in nature. Long before they'd been called boogeymen, there were creatures sneaking around punishing bad children and sometimes adults. Depending on where you go, stories of the hideous thing or creature are somewhat different. In some places, he just messes with you, and in others, he takes you into the dark void or even down below. In some stories, the boogeyman is a creature from another dimension or reality that likes to jump into ours to cause trouble. He feeds on fear and is able to gain power from the fear. That's how he's able to cross over into our dimension, our realm. I did the show Oscuros March 2022. These are beings from who knows where that feed on people's fear. The more terror there is in the world, the stronger they get. Just look at TV today. All the talking heads do is spread fear about. You name it. The world is getting hotter, only if you don't look back at the 1930s. War is everywhere, mostly because some people are making a ton of money selling both sides arms and ammunition. Then there's going to be another, but I can't talk about that. Legends tell of a creature that thrives on fear and preys upon the vulnerable. Some cultures believe it's a female entity, others say it's male. Some think it's just an entity devoid of physical body. The creature is able to take on form of what you fear the most. If you're walking in the woods or along some dark road, you might see the Dogman or Sasquatch. If you're laying there in bed in the dark, you might feel a hand grab you. Some stories of the Bogyman are based on actual events. There are some sick folks out there, some who look at children as their playthings. Hamilton Howard Albert Fish was born May 19, 1870. He became famous as being an American serial killer, rapist, child molester, and cannibal who committed an unknown number of child murders from July 1924 to June of 1928. The authorities only tried him for 3 murders, but there is evidence he may have killed over 100. He was also known as the Gray Man, the Werewolf of Wisteria, the Brooklyn Vampire, the Moon Maniac, and the Bogyman. Fish boasted he had children in every state, and at one time stated his number of victims was about 100. It is not known whether he is referring to the children he molested, murdered, or cannibalized. Fish was apprehended December 13, 1934, and put on trial for the kidnapping and murder of Grace Budd. He was convicted and executed by electric chair. He rode the lightning on January 16, 1936, at the age of 65. He was my age. That's terrible. Some will say no one should be sentenced to death. It's not right. These folks probably have never had a close relative or friend murdered. Lock them up in prison forever so we can pay for their upkeep for as long as they stay alive. Gary Ridgway was sentenced to 48 life sentences in prison. May 5, 2003, Ridgway entered a guilty plea to 48 charges of aggravated first-degree murder. So, where's the problem? He's safely behind bars forever. During the Black Plague of 2020, convicts over 50 years of age were being set free all over Washington state. A panel of 9 people began sifting through files, saying all these poor convicts need to walk free. Gary Ridgway was 1 vote shy of being released. Despite what some folks will say, you cannot reform a serial killer. In a 2021 bill, SB 5036, which passed, eliminated life without parole for everyone in Washington state. Now it's just a matter of time before the Green River Killer is out and about, adding to his head count. A variant to the Bogyman is called the Sac Man. He is found in many Latin American cultures, such as Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, Paraguay, Brazil, as well as Portugal and Spain. He is variously referred to as El Hombre del Costal, El Hombre de las Bolsa, El Hombre del Saco, or in Portugal, O Homem de Saco. All of these names mean the sack man or the bag man. Another Spanish language variant is El Roba Chicos, meaning the child stealer. Similar legends are present in Eastern Europe, like the Bulgarian Tarbalan or the sack man, as well as in Haiti and some countries in Asia. Any underage person outside in the dark in Haiti might encounter Metminwa. His legs are said to be 2 stories high, and he uses them to kick his intended captives to the street. He will sweep you up and stuff you into a sack, and away you go to dinner. Only you're on the menu. Also from Haiti comes the Tonton Mouquet, or Uncle Gunnysack. Uncle Gunnysack is a boogeyman of Haitian Creole folklore. He walked the streets at night looking for children who had stayed out too late. These children were carried away in his gunny sack, never to be seen again. The description of him varied, but he always had a gunny sack over his shoulder and a long knife. The name was later applied to the Milice des Volontaires de la Sécurité Nationale, the paramilitary force of Francis Papadoc Duvalier, Haiti's president for life. As soon as Papadoc, who was actually a doctor, got elected, he did away with the police force and the army. These were replaced with the Tonton Mouquet, the secret police. They would enforce Papadoc's every wish. Anyone imposing him would vanish in the night. The Tonton would use their positions of power to do anything they wanted, under the protection of their own colleagues. The citizens of Haiti feared and despised these men. Papadoc also made voodoo the official religion of Haiti. When Papadoc finally kicked the bucket, his son, who became known as Baby Doc, was elected president for life. During the election, the Tonton Mouquet would stand behind the table where the voting boxes were. They watched as each ballot was placed. Anyone voting against Baby Doc was dealt with that night. They were the real-life boogeymen. German folklore has dozens of different boogeymen. Some of these creatures look like gnomes, people, animals, monsters, ghosts, or the devil. They hang out in forests, bodies of water, cliffs, cornfields, or vineyards. To confuse things, they also go by many names. The Bootsman, the Booman, the Schwarzman. One legend on where the Boozman came from is an old story about a farmer who was having trouble with his fields. Herr Mayer was a pleasant man and a diligent farmer. Unfortunately, he had experienced a farm injury when he was a young man, and now as an old man, he walked with a pronounced limp on his right leg. After years of watching his farm diminish, he took his troubles to the local wise woman, also known as a witch. The Broucherin told Mayer he needed a scarecrow. Not just any scarecrow, but one with enhanced powers. He was instructed to go home and put one together. Once finished, Herr Mayer was to bring the scarecrow back to the old woman, who would then work her magic on it. Herr Mayer got some old pants and a shirt and stuffed them with straw. As he worked, he didn't fill the right leg quite as much as the left, thinking this made the effigy a lot more like him. Once he had a man-like figure, Herr Mayer took the mannequin to the old woman. She laid it out on her table and then went to work. She said some incantations and then blew air into the thing's mouth. It just laid there, not doing anything. When she finished, the witch handed the scarecrow back to Herr Mayer and told him he must burn the scarecrow the last nights of October leading up to Halloween. Herr Mayer placed the scarecrow in his field and waited for things to improve. Soon his crops were growing, and the forest animals were not destroying any of them. The scarecrow just stood there attached to the post in the middle of the field. It was only late at night when the sun was down and the fields were dark that the figure in the field would move about chasing away any animals attempting to feed on his crops. By September, Herr Mayer's fields were ripe with produce. In mid-October, Herr Mayer failed to get out of bed. He felt a huge weight in the center of his chest. When the doctor arrived, it was already too late. The old farmer had died. The scarecrow was still out in the field. It watched as the funeral procession carried Herr Mayer away. The fields were not harvested, and the produce began to rot. The human-shaped figure remained standing in the field. The spirit was drawn away back to where it had come from. The scarecrow was left as nothing but an empty shell. An evil spirit spotted this empty shell standing in the overgrown field. It slipped inside and it began rampaging about the countryside. The scarecrow set fire to the neighbors' fields. It killed livestock, it damaged farm equipment, and it terrorized the farmers. The scarecrow began causing all manner of trouble for all of the farmers in the surrounding area. The witch that had breathed life into the creature tried using her magic to try driving the evil spirit out of the effigy. When this didn't work, she used her magic to try to destroy the scarecrow, which would cause the evil spirit to no longer have a host in which to do its nastiness. Now, according to the legend, the scarecrow and the evil spirit escaped and continue wandering the countryside today, looking for their next person to torment. If you decide to make a scarecrow to protect your fields, be sure to burn it before October is over. The Hawa comes from Algeria. It is a monstrous creature that is known for eating children while they're still alive. This thing is described as having the tail of a scorpion, one leg from a donkey and one from a panther, the claw of a lobster as a right hand, and the hand of a monkey for the left. The chest is that of a turtle. It has horns of a mountain goat, the face of an ape, and the eyes are glowing with fire. Its long hair is actually live poisonous snakes that are waiting to strike anyone who gets too close. Its coat is made up of pieces of cloth from the children that it has devoured. The creature hides on the side of the road out of town, waiting for any children walking along at night. You don't even have to be bad, just be out after dark. El Coco. I hear about El Coco all the time. It's quite popular here in Laredo, as well as most Spanish-speaking countries. In some parts of the world, El Coco is called El Cucuy, El Bolo, El Cucafera in Spain. In Spain, parents will sing a lullaby to tell rhymes to their children, warning them that if they don't hurry up and get to sleep, El Coco is going to come and get them. I've heard my wife sing that song a few times. The rhyme originated in the 17th century and has evolved over the years, but still it retains its original meaning. Coconuts got their name because the hairy brown face with those 3 indentations reminded the Portuguese sailors of El Coco. El Coco is found in Spanish-speaking Latin American countries such as Bolivia, Colombia, Guatemala, Peru, Mexico, El Salvador, and Honduras. In Venezuela, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, Chile, Uruguay, Panama, and Argentina, the name is El Cuco. El Coco, El Cucoya, El Cuco, it's an evil monster that hides under children's beds at night. It kidnaps or eats the children that don't obey their parents or go to sleep when it's time to do so. Just what you need to hear. There's a monster hiding under your bed, and it's going to kill you and eat you. Now go to sleep. Sweet dreams. In Spain and Portugal, El Coco is covered in thick black hair, like El Mano Peluda. In other parts of the world, El Coco is more human-looking. It has bright, glowing eyes, and this is how you can tell where it's hiding. In Brazil, El Coco looks like a monster with the body of a woman and the head of an alligator. Or she looks like an old lady with a sack over her shoulder. There it is again, the bag. She used to abduct children. I wonder if that's why they call them old bags. El Coco is often the main villain in children's books. Where the boogeyman came from is different depending on the legend. One story is the monster used to be a human child who was transformed due to abuse. Others believe this creature came from some other realm, like down below maybe, or some other dimension. El Coco doesn't always kidnap kids. Some stories say he just looks in through the window at night, keeping an eye on the kids so they will behave. Sometimes he's hiding in the closet, still watching and waiting. There are some stories that say he will actually force kids to get out of bed at night. The child will be possessed by the monster to get up, leave the house, vanish into some unknown place, never to be seen again. A lot of people say they've seen either El Coco or evidence of his having been nearby. They swear this creature was watching them in the middle of the night. They saw it out of their window. I don't know if you can consider La Llorona as also being the boogeyman. La Llorona can be traced back over 4 centuries, although the origins of the tale have been kind of lost to time. In some versions of the story, La Llorona is actually La Malinche, the native woman who assisted Hernan Cortez. In another tale, she's a beautiful Indian woman who fell in love with a Spaniard. They had a fling, but he lost interest in her after a few years. The villagers castigated her for having the offspring of some foreigner. Not wanting to be driven from her village, the woman drowned her kids. Once the deed was done, she felt kind of bad about murdering her children, so she jumped into the river as well. Heaven refused to let her in unless she could go back to Earth, find the souls of her children. She is still searching for them today. An entirely different origin story coincides with the arrival of the Spaniards in America. According to this version, the tale La Llorona was actually La Malinche, a native woman who served as an interpreter and a guide for Hernan Cortez during the conquest of Mexico. The conquistador left her after she gave birth, and instead he married a Spanish woman. Despised now by her people, it is said that La Malinche murdered Cortez and his children. The most popular version is a young peasant woman named Maria who married a wealthy man. The couple lived happily for a time and had 2 children together before her husband lost interest in her. One day, Maria was walking along the riverbank when she saw her husband ride by with another woman, younger and better looking. In a writ of felis jage, that's what Inspector Clouseau from A Shot in the Dark said, in a fit of jealous rage, Maria threw her kids into the river. Now, boy, that's an angry mother. When her anger subsided and she realized what she had done, she succumbed to such profound grief that she spent the rest of her days wailing by the river while looking for her children. In another version of the story, Maria cast herself into the river immediately after her children. In yet another, Maria was a vain woman who spent her nights carousing about town, drinking and dancing and drinking, instead of taking care of her children. After one drunken evening, she returned home to find them both had been drowned. She was cursed for her neglectfulness to search for them in the afterlife. I hope my cat screaming in the background isn't making it onto the program. I no longer have my condenser mic to keep that stuff out of the background. Hopefully my old computer will be back up soon. Oops. If you hear La Llorona, it's time to leave. If you go looking for her and she sees you, she will follow you home trying to get you to help her find her children. Any kids that encounter La Llorona will be kidnapped and taken to replace her dead kids. Way back, I was sitting on the road that run along the river. I was close to that huge antenna off of Gonzales Street. I saw a bunch of kids walking along the road. They would stop and they'd look into the bushes as they passed. They came close enough to my vehicle and I asked them what they were doing. One told me that their uncle, a nasty person, kind of thing I would have said, had told them to go look for La Llorona along the riverbank. This guy had my sense of humor. I told them all the reasons they should not be looking for her. In the countries of Central and Eastern Mediterranean, children who misbehave are threatened with a creature known as babau, babu, or babò. In Italy, the babau is also called l'uomo nero, or the black man. He is portrayed as a tall, thin man wearing a black coat with either a black hood or a hat that hides his face. Parents will sometimes knock loudly on the bottom of the table, saying, there's somebody knocking at the door. They will then say, l'uomo nero, the black man, causing their kids to scramble for the bedroom. A nursery rhyme in Italy goes like this. Lullaby Lula, oh, who do I give this child to? I will give him to the Bogyman, who is going to keep him for a whole year. L'uomo nero is not supposed to eat or really harm kids, but instead he takes them away to a mysterious and frightening place for about a year before returning them to their parents. This next one is not a boogeyman to scare kids, but to scare their parents. The ghost named Wee Wee Gombel is related to an event that occurred in Bukit Gombel, Samarang, Indonesia. Long ago, a couple lived for years, but as time went by, the husband realized that his wife was barren, and he stopped loving her. The husband began to sneak around at night, visiting women of negotiable affections. One night she found him and caught him in flagrante delicto, red-handed, in the arms of another woman. She was furious and she killed him. The villagers, mostly the men, chased her out of town. She ran deep into the forest where she hid for a while, and then later she committed suicide. Her spirit became Wee Wee Gombel. She hangs out in the tops of Aringa Piñata palm, where she has her nest. Late at night, she flies about the area looking for children who are neglected or abused by their parents. She keeps all of these children that she catches, only returning them if their parents repent and promise to take better care of their kids. This story is taught to encourage children to be cautious and to stay at home at night. It should be used to teach parents to take better care of their kids. Somebody else might come along and take care of them for them. Traditionally, the Wee Wee Gombel is represented as a woman with long, saggy, hanging woman parts and vampire-like fangs. Wee Wee Gombel is similar to the ghost known as Hantu Kopek in Malay folklore. The French equivalent of the boogeyman is Le Croquet Mitten, or the mitten biter. It is also known as the hand cruncher. This weird creature hides under the bed. If you sleep with your hand or foot hanging over the side, Le Croquet Mitten will grab your hand with its teeth. I know a lot of people who can't sleep with their hand or foot out over the edge of the mattress. This is one thing I don't worry about. I don't know why, but I can sleep with my hand almost on the floor without any worries. I like to sleep with my foot hanging over the side. It doesn't seem to bother me in the least bit. Maybe there's something I just don't know. Maybe I should take more precautions from now on. Originating in the northern city of Oga, Akita, Japan, the Namahagi is a ghostly, ogre-like demon used to frighten lazy or badly behaving children into changing their ways, or else. Any child not listening to their parents will be snatched away by this creature. Legend says the Namahagi were brought to Japan by the Han Emperor of China over 2,000 years ago. The demon, like ogres, stole crops and kidnapped young women and children from the village of Oga. In a plan to drive the Namahagi out of the area, the villagers promised to give up all their young women in the village if the ogres could build a massive stone staircase overnight. If they failed, the ogres were to leave the area for good. The creatures agreed. I guess they were kind of stupid. Anyway, just before the staircase was completed, one of the villagers imitated the sound of a rooster crowing, tricking the Namahagi into believing that the morning had arrived and they had failed to complete their task. The Namahagi left Oga never to be seen again. In another plan to get their children to behave, the people created a Namahagi festival, which takes place on New Year's Eve. The parents tell their children to be good, or the Namahagi will take them away. During the festival, people dress up like these creatures and travel about the streets, armed with swords and knives. Kids are told that these are the real demons and that they're looking for bad little children to eat. The Namahagi travel in groups, roaming the streets and knocking on people's doors. They ask the people living there if they have any bad sons or daughters that the Namahagi can have for dinner. To make sure everything is in order, these creatures carry the Naughty and Nice book, where they jot down notes offered by the parents on how they want their children to behave for the new year. They check it twice, like Santa. After the children are sufficiently terrified, the head of the household will appease the ogres by giving them sake and rice cakes before sending them on their way. Newlywed couples are expected to divulge all of the nasty deeds that they are guilty of during the first year of marriage. The Namahagi ritual still takes place in Oga every New Year's Eve. Visitors are welcome to observe the traditional practice, but they say, please do not abduct any bad children. I don't speak French, which is a bit of a bad thing, seeing as my grandfather on my mother's side was named Butcher. I don't speak German either, or Scottish, or Swedish. I'll do my best to not destroy the following French names. In the early days of European settlement, the French people were among the first of European nations to interact with the Wabanaki Federation of Tribes. A lot of Europeans thought the Indians were the lost tribes of Israel, which led to them wishing to interact with them. The French began to trade with the locals, followed by living in their villages. This led to many Frenchmen marrying Indian women and fathering kids who could continue living in the tribe or move to the bigger settlements and carry on the trade business of their family. Some Europeans tried to get the better of the Indians by trading not-so-good goods for things the locals had. Some thought the locals would make good slaves back in Europe or be put to work on plantations. The French chose a much more peaceable pathway to settle the New World. Commerce formed the basis of their relationship with the Wabanaki tribes. Furs, food, wood, tools, luxury goods were all exchanged. They also shared stories of legends from both sides of the Atlantic. The Indians talked about their great spirits. Some were known as tricksters, some were heroes. The creator spirit, and heroes usually established or restored order. Tricksters and animals can have either positive or negative qualities. Sometimes they're helpful and entertaining, and at other times they're unpredictable, deceptive, even violent. The Frenchmen told of their legends like Loup-garou and the Gargoyles. The bonhomie, except Howard, was mostly kept at home, being told to their children just before lights out. Bonhomie translates as good man, which is like saying an honest politician. It was a thing to give these stories names that did not describe the nasty creatures being talked about. Sept Harrer translates as 7 o'clock. So the bonhomie Sept Howard can be translated as the 7 o'clock man. As for the good part, I think that was just a plot twist. Some say they used the nice name for this creature so that they wouldn't upset him and draw his attention to their homes. He's most commonly depicted as an old man with a heavy sack over his shoulder. Sound familiar? A sack filled with bad children, seeing as he is mostly talked about in the Great White North. Doug and Bob McKenzie, eh? Go watch Strange Brew, eh? The Great White North is also known as Canada, eh? I have to say this, I've been to Canada a few times. I know a few folks living up there. David Scott, who I met because he originally thought that I was someone else, and John Kirk, the retired Mountie. I don't recall either of these men ever saying, eh? But I've heard folks from the up north who do say it. So let me know, is it really a thing or just the McKenzie brothers being weird? I was talking about the 7 o'clock man until I took a side trip. Seeing as he lived up there in the north, he dressed in a huge coat and a hat. He would sneak into kids' bedrooms at night and check to see if they were asleep, as they were supposed to be, or sitting up doing what kids did late at night back before they'd invented comic books or flashlights. If the child was still awake, he or she would be snatched from their bed and stuffed into the sack. All children who were taken by this figure were said to be eaten or otherwise never to return to their families. There are a few variations on the tale, which sometimes arise from other folk tales and sometimes comes from being lost in translation from French to English. One version gives the 7 o'clock man ability like the Sandman, with magical sand that he puts into children to make them sleep. He blows it into their eyes. This is a more recent version, which made the 7 o'clock man seem a lot more benevolent. Scaring children into sleeping, which I'm still wondering about, was no longer practiced by some parents. Another version of the 7 o'clock man was created because of a mistranslation. Back when things were rotten, most doctors actually were there to heal patients instead of empty their bank accounts. To become a doctor did take a few years. You needed to work for another doctor to become licensed. Many distant towns and communities didn't have a doctor living within a few hundred miles. Anyone getting sick or injured would be taken to the local healer, someone who knew a lot of things to fix the human body. It was not with a formal education. Most cures were from nature. Drink this potion made from the bark of a willow tree to cure that toothache. Acetylsalic acid comes from the bark of the willow tree, and it's better known as aspirin today. If you were unfortunate enough to break a bone, which I have, and it always hurts, the solution was to go see the bone setter. The French name was Bonham Septhour, which to me sounds a lot like the other name, but they say that it's a different name. Sounds the same, and it's practically spelled the same. The bone setter didn't come equipped with any form of anesthetics. Maybe a piece of wood to bite on before the bones were manipulated. That even sounds painful. The thought of two pieces of broken bone rubbing together while this guy's pulling on your broken extremity. Anyway, if you were lucky when you arrived at the bone setter's home, he would not have a current patient. It would be quiet and peaceful. If there was somebody in line ahead of you, you got treated to the sound of agony as the broken appendages were pulled and set. Any bone setter living in town would on occasion entertain the entire community with his treatments. How does bone setter become the boogeyman? Well, once more, those parents who thought it was a good idea to terrorize their children. They would tell the misbehaving youngins, "Go to sleep right now, or the bone setter will come and instill upon you all the pain and suffering he has collected over the years." Now, I know that doesn't sound like a Canadian or a French accent, but it's the only one I've got. Now, sleep tight, youngins, and remember, we love you. Another possible mistaken translation could have come from a similar phrase, the bomb setter. This occupation was another name for the lamp lighter. Before electricity, there were people whose job it was to move about the city lighting gas lamps on the city streets. To ensure that there was light at the right time, the bomb setter would work hard to ensure the gas lamps were lit before 7 p.m., the time when the Bonham Septhour was said to strike. It is possible that this version of the city-dwelling French people told their children. There is evidence that this particular type of boogeyman may be separate or have the name Bonham Septhour in Montreal and France. In the legend of Dark Earth, an animated story of the Bonham Septhour, things go from bad to worse in this story. A brother and a sister were working at the local mill when they discovered the hour was late and the sun was going down. Well, actually, the horizon is moving up. The siblings run to their wagon to try beating the darkness back home. As they tear through the countryside, a hooded figure riding a horse comes from behind, catching up to their wagon. This must be the 7 o'clock man trying to catch them and do whatever nastiness he pleases. The boy, in an act of desperation, throws a bag filled with flour at the hooded figure. The flour explodes in a cloud of white, blinding the horse rider. Unable to see, the rider steers his mount off a nearby cliff, falling to his death. The twist of the story comes to light. The rider had actually been their father, who was trying to catch the two in the wagon to save them from the creature that was hiding in the back. The 7 o'clock man was actually in the back of the wagon, waiting for the opportunity to grab the pair and drag them off to his lair. Maine has a history of having been inhabited by people for 10,000 years. Before written languages could be developed, people passed on their legends by telling them, oral translations, usually around a campfire at night when it was too dark to get any work done. As time went by, a few stories got jangled up until they no longer represented the original tale. There is a being told of in Maine who is a bad example of the boogeyman. The Indians told about the Mata Hoodoo, a being whose name means the great devil. He was a practitioner of the blackest kind of magic, a sorcerer who would scour the battlefields to make magical items from people's dead body parts. He was believed to be so powerful that he could cast a spell just by looking into your eyes. Kind of like the Diablero from Kolchak. He was feared by the tribes all throughout Maine and Quebec for his supernatural powers and vindictive ways. Just like the Skinwalker, the Indians didn't even mention his name, thinking that to say his name would draw him to you. He would play nasty, horrible tricks on anybody foolish enough to seek him out in his remote campsite at Muskoka Mountain on the Allagash River. Those who did wound up as lost spirits roaming the woods trying to find peace. He is not mentioned frequently. This witch was so feared that no one wanted to even mention his name. The few stories people can find liken the Matahoodoo to a giant cannibal. His location was uncertain. Some said the giant lived on Grand Manan Island. They might have been more than one Matahoodoo. The First Council Fires says that the Matahoodoo demonstrated his strength at the first council meeting of elders by giving the bull moose its odd antlers and its unusual humpback by hitting the aggressive animal on the head. The Great Spirit punished Matahoodoo for his misdeeds by zapping him into a pile of ash. Not even this was enough to destroy him, but it did give him a permanent smell of burning ash. The story from Seven Eyes and Seven Legs from 1930s placed the Matahoodoo on the mountain near the river in Aroostook County, Maine. In the chapter entitled Matahoodoo the Skull Decorator, an anthropologist named Dr. John B. and his guide Raoul went to investigate the stories of this giant cannibal living in the mountains. The doctor wanted to learn about this witch's powers, and he wanted to obtain a shrunken head and a decorated skull to show his colleagues. When the two men finally met with the Matahoodoo, they offered him a lot of money and trade goods for their sought-after items. The Matahoodoo had known for some time that the doctor and his guide were looking for him. The decorated skull that Dr. John was given turned out to be from his guide. The skull was able to speak, even after being removed from its owner. It would talk and sing and kind of entertain the doctor. The shrunken head that Dr. John requested was his own. His own head had been shrunken down to the size of an apple, complete with a high-pitched voice. Afterwards, Dr. John was seen wandering about the Aroostook woods well into the 80s. The doctor had been given an extended life so that his torment would last a long time. The Nguni of South Africa, that's not the Goonies, the Nguni tell of the Tokolosh or the Tokolos, a dwarf-like water spirit. It is mischievous and an evil spirit that can become invisible by drinking water or by swallowing a stone. The Tokolosh are called upon by malevolent people to cause trouble for others. At its least harmful, the Tokolosh can be used to scare children, but its powers extend to causing illness or death of its victims. The creature might be banished by a priest who has the powers to perform an exorcism. The advent of this phantom Tokolosh came about through the Bantu folklore to explain why people would inexplicably die while sleeping at night in their huts. Tokolosh are described as being short men about hip-high who randomly stole one's life in the night unless you lifted your bed high up into the air. Some Zulu people are still superstitious when it comes to things like the Tokolosh, a hairy creature created by a witch doctor to harm his enemies or the enemies of those who hired him. In the middle of the night, the Tokolosh would sneak into a hut in order to bite off sleeping people's toes. Ouch. Legend says the only way to keep the Tokolosh away at night is to put a few bricks under each leg of your bed. This would elevate the sleeper too high for the small man to reach. Those must have been really big bricks. In order to create a Tokolosh, the person with an axe to grind would visit a witch doctor. To get the witch doctor to create this thing, the person has to request it and will offer to deliver the soul of one of their own family members to the doctor. The soul is to be chosen by the witch doctor, and it at a time and place of his choosing, and it can be any member of the family. The witch doctor goes looking for a dead body, or he goes and makes one for himself. You have to be really mad or not like your family to use one of these creatures. The ritual involves shoving a hot spike through an eye socket of the corpse and into the brain. This removes the creature's ability to think on its own. The Tokolosh is then sent to terrorize and haunt its intended victims. After the victims have succumbed to either fear or they've run for their lives to other parts of the country, the witch doctor is then ready for his payment. At a time and a place of his choosing, he will steal the soul of a family member of the person who hired him. The soulless person is then a slave to the witch doctor for as long as his body manages to stay afloat. I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. I hope I did a good job with this backup camera and substandard recording equipment. Hopefully, by Monday or Tuesday, I'll have my big computer back with a camera that works and the microphone that, well, anyway, it'll make the show better, I hope. If you enjoyed tonight's show, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell people you don't even know. They should be listening to the show. And if you'd like to get a t-shirt like this one, you can find them at Paranormal Roundtable. That's Josh Turner's podcast. He has lots of cool stuff like this. And if you give him money, he gives you free things. Wait, that didn't sound right. If you give him money, he gives you things. How's that? That sounds better. Anyway, till next Saturday, this is Chris James for Strange Things. And it just doesn't get much stranger than this.